This is week 1 journal by Stephanie Callahan. The first part on equity versus equality. So equity is attempting to attain equal outcomes for all students by taking into consideration individual differences, while equality is simply giving the same opportunity to all students or treating all students the same. So basically, equality is saying one size fits all, while equity is saying that that's not true. What can I do to make all this fit to individual differences so that way everybody has the same outcomes? So one example would be a teacher teaching with equality assigns an oral presentation to all students. There's no other options. You do an oral presentation. A teacher teaching with equity is going to assign a presentation giving the students the options to do an oral, written, or visual presentation based on their abilities and their strengths. Somebody may understand and grasp that concepts better with a visual presentation. Somebody may have better oral skills and prefer to do it that way. Another example would be a teacher teaching with equity provides students with the accommodations they need to succeed. So a student may need a word box on a test, or for a math test they may need an extra 10 minutes. A teacher teaching with equality is going to be focusing on fairness, and all students are going to work with the same materials, typically materials that work for the majority of the students. No extra time is going to be given on a math test because they're focusing on fairness and everybody gets the same. So here's a good representation of equality versus equity. You give everybody the same. Some are going to have an advantage while others are still not going to succeed. If you allocate your resources appropriately, everybody can succeed. If we teach with equity, everyone succeeds. Is how I view it. One size does not fit all, and we should make sure that all students have equal outcomes as much as we can. Part 2. So here's a good representation of how the Common Core math standards progress over the course of the years. I'm going to focus on geometry because this was one that starts in kinder and progresses forward. So here's the progression of geometry K through 6. They really build on each other. So you start with the basics and build up to more complex concepts, but those rely on the ones before it. So kinder, they're starting with the basics. They're just identifying, describing, analyzing, comparing, creating, and composing shapes. First through third, it's the same standard title, but they're really mastering it and diving deeper each year. So they're reasoning with shapes and their attributes. In first grade, they're just starting with knowing the difference between defining and non-defining attributes. So defining would be the ones that, a triangle is closed, it's 3-sided, a rectangle is 4-sided, stuff like that. Non-defining would be their color, their size. In first grade, they're also composing 2- and 3-dimensional shapes. So your rectangles, squares, triangles, trapezoids for your 2-dimensional, your 3-dimensionals, cubes, cones, cylinders. And then they're going to partition shapes into 4 and 2 equal sides or parts. And they're going to use the words of like halves, fourths, quarters. In second grade, we're going to dive a little deeper. They're going to be able to identify quads, pentagons, hexagons, cubes. They're going to partition shapes into the same size squares and equal parts. So when they're going to be using words, descriptive words like halves, thirds, 3/3, fourths. Third grade, they're going to dive even deeper. They're going to be able to put shapes in different categories based on the same attributes, different attributes. They're going to be able to partition shapes again into equal sizes, but they're equal parts, but they're going to be using describing words based on the units of fractions of a whole. So you're a quarter, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, in that way. And then fourth grade, they're going to dive in and to shapes of identifying angles and lines of shapes, and they're going to be able to classify shapes based on their line and angle properties. Fifth grade, they're going to start graphing points to solve real world and mathematical problems. Sixth grade, they're going to continue solving real world and mathematical problems based on area, surface area, and volume. And in order for them to understand the concept of area, surface area, and volume, they're going to need to have the baseline understanding of shapes and how to describe and classify shapes. So they'll be building up from kindergarten to sixth grade and just keep building on the skills that are going to be necessary to get to that.